When I was 6 years old, I decided I was going to be a journalist. As a little girl growing up in Santa Fe, I was relentlessly curious, always asking questions. In fact, my parents used to limit me to 10 questions per day when that curiosity got particularly intolerable. I started writing articles first in my little journals and then on our family computer, printing out my masterpieces with our dot matrix printer. And always the Nancy Drew fan, I was an early investigator too. In fact, I think it was around middle school when I decided that I would solve the mystery of the JFK assassination and write all about it for Time magazine. But unlike most little kids, I never wavered from that first dream of what I wanted to be when I grew up. Now, I'm a little type A. So right from the start, I started doing everything I needed to do to become that world-class journalist of my dreams. For starters, I was the editor of every school newspaper from elementary school to college. I got my undergraduate degree in communications before going on to study journalism at NYU. I was a fellow in residence at the prestigious Poynter Institute for Media Studies. I interned in LA and Paris and New York. I went to the right schools, I got the right grades, the right internships, took the right opportunities, won the right awards. So when I was 23, and I got the opportunity to go to Nepal to be a journalist covering the civil war between the faltering Hindu monarchy and those trying to overthrow it, I knew I was the right person for the job. And it was my dream job, traveling the world, telling stories. As I prepared for that trip to Nepal, I felt the momentum of those years of preparation driving me into that moment. And I was ready. Ready for my international professional debut, my defining moments. But defining moments are funny because they never happen the way we think that they will. Now, I knew that foreign correspondence is an expensive and disaster-seeking profession. Right? We bounce around the globe at the convenience of wars and on the heels of outbreaks and explosions. And honestly, the danger was part of the appeal. I wanted to do something, learn something, go somewhere that not everyone could go. What I wasn't quite prepared for, though, was some of the realities of being a foreign correspondent. Have you ever thought about who is covering the news from foreign locales? And not just on TV, but for the world's newspapers and magazines? And wire services? Well, they're mostly white male outsiders, people who have little or no social, historical, political, cultural context about the place they're reporting from, people who don't speak the language, people who stay in fancy hotels and travel around with equipment worth more than what the people that they're covering will make in a lifetime. Well, I went to Nepal as one of them. And I knew in the back of my mind that one of the reasons I was getting this big break was because journalism was in trouble. Foreign bureaus were closing at rapid rates, and so more and more international coverage was being entrusted to young, inexperienced stringers like me. So there I was in Nepal, doing the work I thought I was born to do. But right from the start, it wasn't like I thought it was going to be. I was working through translators provided by the Nepali government. I didn't trust them, and local people didn't trust me. I lacked access to unscripted conversations and authentic interactions. And more, I got the sense that the stories in front of me were not the real stories of this place. So while my foreignness gave me credibility on the world stage, it got me nowhere with the people whose stories I was trying so earnestly to tell. So after just the first couple of weeks, I started coming to terms with a difficult reality. There were too many barriers between me and the truth. And then one day, I was in a remote village interviewing this dynamic local woman, Pratima. Pratima was the matriarch of her village, which had been ravaged by the war. She told me she didn't know how old she was, but based on the wisdom in her eyes, she could have been 100. Pratima was the ultimate insider. She understood the context of her reality in ways that I never could. She had the complete trust of the local villagers, She knew their stories, and she knew the whole story of the place. Now, through my outsider's lens, when I looked at Pratima and the village, what I saw was a place that lacked total access to healthcare, whose schools had been forced closed by the Civil War. I saw Pratima surrounded by poverty and destruction. Yet she was hopeful and strong. She saw a different set of stories. So there I was, trying to interview across languages and cultures. By that time, I spoke a little Nepali, and Pratima spoke a little English, but it was difficult and incomplete. Still, there was something in me pushing forward, saying the story of this woman and this place have to be told. I did not want to continue to tell the government-sanctioned version of the war. There were plenty of other correspondents sticking to that classic narrative of war, poverty, disaster, disease. I wanted something different. I wanted to tell the real, raw, human story of Pratima and this place, so I thought it could make a difference. And then, suddenly realizing it wasn't mine to tell, I handed her my pen. I said, "You write it. You write what it is to be a woman in this village shrouded by war. Write about everything that is amazing and everything that is awful. Tell the story of this place as it is right now, and do it quoting the villagers who won't speak to me. Tell the story infused with the context and the facts that you know so completely." And she did. What Pratima handed back to me a few days later was the piece of journalism that had eluded me and the others. Everything us foreigners didn't know, couldn't find, wouldn't understand, they were there in her story. And it was in that moment that everything changed for me. I had two completely opposing and equally true realizations. I had my dream job, and I was the wrong person for it. I was devastated. Now, I felt those years of momentum grind to a halt. But that devastation fast turned to determination, because it was also then that I realized the world needs a new model of international journalism, and that in order to truly change the storyteller would also have to change. So I began the painstaking process of reimagining my definition of journalism. And I kept telling myself a new way to gather and disseminate international news could change everything. The what-ifs in my mind were endless. What if the world understood places like Nepal in their fullest context? What would that mean for all of us? What if even the most developing communities had their own robust press corps to increase transparency and access to information? And what if the global reader, people like you and me, learned to demand more than just disaster-fueled news coverage, and instead sought out stories that presented the world's people and places on their best days instead of just their worst? So it turns out that my defining moment wouldn't be limited to just one story from one war zone. In fact, it wouldn't even really be a moment. It would be a movement. A decade later, that movement is a social enterprise called Global Press Institute, or GPI. GPI reimagines journalism and changes the game in three major ways. First, GPI provides a world-class journalism education to women in developing media markets, women like Pratima, who are the ultimate insiders. They come to GPI from a variety of backgrounds, levels of education, experience, socioeconomic status, but they all have the context and the access to tell those missing stories. Then GPI offers employment to 100% of their training graduates, making sure that these journalists are working with editors, translators, and fact-checkers for our publication, Global Press Journal. Over the last 9 years, our journalists have won more than 24 international journalism awards. And their stories do what I was convinced they could. They spark conversation and debate, locally and globally. Their stories have changed laws in 2 countries, and they change minds every day, opening the world's eyes to a new reality that all around the world, local people are innovating to solve their own problems, and that developing communities are more than just a compilation of victims and disasters. To complete the cycle of impact, GPI also runs a syndication business, Global Press News Service, to ensure that these incredible stories reach the largest possible audience. With more than 100 partners, from NPR to Al Jazeera, local media outlets, even governments, schools, NGOs, they've all come to rely on GPI News. Today, there are more than 130 women across 27 different countries who proudly call themselves GPI journalists. From Haiti to Cameroon, Mexico to India, Guatemala to Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, even Sri Lanka, and of course, Nepal. Together, these amazing women now serve more than 5 million readers all over the world, including you. Chances are you've read their stories already, and you will continue to, because GPI not only provides international news at a fraction of the cost of foreign correspondence, but we're changing communities by employing women in positions of literate leadership. And this news is helping to keep us all better informed about not just the problems, but the progress in our ever-changing world. In so many ways, GPI has mastered momentum. We are growing faster than ever before, opening news desks in new countries, training more journalists every day, every year. But momentum is not a place, certainly not a place where we can get comfortable. You work and you struggle and you sweat trying to build it, waiting for that next moment to level up. And often, it arrives with a jolt. A month ago, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake and a flurry of aftershocks that continued even today shook much of my beloved Nepal to the ground. As expected, the world's media rushed to the scene. Now, the GPI team in Nepal, which had been in place for 8 years already, before the earthquake, they were busy covering the progress of the country. And Nepal had momentum, so much going in the right direction. We had stories in the works about how Nepal had dramatically reduced its rates of maternal mortality. They were inching closer to completing a new constitution, and they were implementing some of the world's most successful anti-poaching laws. But to the rest of the world's media, when the country was on its way up, it wasn't a story. Nepal was only important after it had fallen down. In the hours after the quake, once we determined everyone was safe, the team sprang into action. But they did not follow the traditional media path of just surveying the damage, quoting international officials, and searching for the saddest and the bloodiest scenes. They told that different set of stories. They gave voice to their people, something they didn't need translators or special access to do. They investigated the main hospital's capacity to care for an influx of thousands of patients. They went to the holy Hindu sites where foreigners can't go to document the beauty and the pain of the funeral ritual. They wrote about impromptu sing-alongs happening in the tent camps and about how the cultural conventions of the untouchable caste were thrown out when people needed to be saved or bodies recovered. They showed the resilience of their people, and with their articles and their incredible photographs, they proved themselves to be world-class journalists. But the truth is, their greatest news value is now, and in the months and years ahead, because most of the cameras and teams of foreign correspondents have already left Nepal in favor of another disaster already happening somewhere else. So it's going to be up to the GPI team to be the voices of reconstruction. to tell the stories of how people rebuild, how government responds, to be the watchdogs and the witnesses of Nepal's rebirth. And that's what GPI does all over the world. Every day, these extraordinary women journalists bravely defy stereotypes in order to boldly tell those missing stories so that all of us can better understand each other and better understand our world. And one more thing, for the record, now I really do have my dream job. Thank you.